Welcome to Life Stories, where the people meant to love you can be the very ones who bury you alive. Imagine being erased, not forgotten, but deliberately written out of your own family. Not with violence, but with silence. Now imagine receiving an invitation, years later, to celebrate the very people who cast you out. Would you go back, or stay gone forever? This is the story of a woman who walked away with nothing, built everything, and returned not for revenge, but to reclaim the truth they tried to destroy. It's raw, it's personal, and by the time it's over, you may find yourself asking if forgiveness is healing or just another way to hide the wound. Let's begin. Savannah Hale hadn't spoken her family's name in 5 years. Not out loud, not even in whispers. She trained herself to treat it like a dead language, something ancient and sharp that only brought blood to the tongue when remembered. And yet, as she stood barefoot in the middle of her downtown Austin apartment, golden evening light catching on the edge of her kitchen counter, there it was again. Hale, etched in gold foil, sealed in wax. The envelope lay on the floor like a landmine, thick, cream-colored, with the Hale family crest she'd long convinced herself she no longer remembered. But her body remembered. Her stomach turned. Her throat tightened. Her hand hovered over it like it might burn her. In some ways, it already had. She picked it up slowly, weighing it like evidence. She was a judge now, state-appointed 35, the youngest in her district. She weighed things carefully. Arguments. Truth. Betrayals. This was all three. Inside, the invitation was excessive. Calligraphy so dramatic it looked like it belonged on the program for a coronation, not a wedding. You are cordially invited to the marriage of Logan Hale and Harper Rhodes. Savannah blinked. Logan, the heir, the golden boy, the one who toasted to her failure in front of an entire ballroom the last time they'd seen each other. Harper Rhodes, she didn't recognize the name, but it was easy to imagine the type. Sleek, blonde, vetted by generations of expectation. Savannah's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. Of course they'd want her there. Not for forgiveness, not even for spectacle, for optics. Then a second page slipped from the envelope. Plain, lined paper. No gold, no wax, no performance, just shaky handwriting. Please come. I miss you. They don't know I'm writing, Mom. Savannah stared at the words, her chest aching in that old, dangerous way, like maybe, somewhere in the rubble, something had survived. But the ache was quickly swallowed by the memory. Her mother's silence. The night Logan humiliated her over a roasted turkey, and her mother did nothing but sip her wine. That was the last night Savannah Hale had been a daughter. She dropped the note on the counter and reached instinctively for the silver pendant hanging beneath her blouse, a tiny Lady Justice charm. Her grandfather had given it to her the day she passed the bar. "You're enough," he'd whispered then, "with or without them." But Elias Hale had died less than a year later. And after he was gone, they came for her with knives they called tradition. Savannah walked to the liquor cabinet and poured 2 fingers of scotch into a glass, the good kind she saved for verdict days and nights she didn't cry. She sipped it slowly, her eyes locked on the RSVP card like it might answer all the questions she hadn't asked out loud. What did they want from her now? A performance? A surrender? Or worse, a seat at the table she had once been publicly cut out of? Her phone buzzed. A single name lit up the screen. Maya, her anchor. Without hesitation, she typed, "Maya, they invited me." She hesitated, then added, "Should I go?" As she waited for the typing dots to appear, Savannah wandered back to the envelope. This wasn't just a wedding invite. It was a trigger, a trap, a test. But there was something else too, a scent she couldn't ignore. Opportunity. She walked to the back of her apartment, where a small safe sat hidden beneath floorboards. The click of the code was muscle memory. Inside, among court transcripts and old press clippings, sat a yellowed envelope. Unopened. Her grandfather's final letter. The one he handed her on his deathbed, with a raspy, unfinished sentence. "When the silence gets too loud, open it." Savannah had waited 5 years. She peeled the seal. "Real power isn't loud," his writing read. "It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't scream in rooms that were never built to hear you. Real power rewrites the blueprints. You weren't born to fit in, Savannah. You were born to outgrow. The words hit her like a quiet explosion. Outgrow. That night, she searched the name Harper Rhodes. The face that appeared made Savannah's pulse skip. A young housing rights lawyer who had once stood in Savannah's courtroom, bold and brilliant, fighting for a group of low-income tenants. She remembered admiring her tenacity. Back then, Savannah hadn't known she was dating Logan. Now the woman who had once quoted Savannah's own legal precedent was about to marry the man who had erased her. Savannah sat back in her chair, a slow, wry smile pulling at her lips. This wasn't just a wedding. This was symmetry. Justice had a funny way of circling back. She filled out the RSVP with a clean, deliberate stroke. I'll be there. Then she sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mail the next morning, her heels echoing on the steps like the ticking of a long-forgotten clock finally starting again. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that while she planned her quiet return, Logan Hale was already preparing a storm of his own. He knew she wouldn't stay buried, and this time, he wasn't going to wait for her to dig her way out. What would you do if the people who broke you asked you to smile for the camera? Would you go back to reclaim your name or walk away to protect your peace? What Savannah finds when she steps back into the Hale estate won't just shatter the family narrative. It will expose the secret they were willing to destroy her to protect. The driveway to Hale Manor curved like a question mark carved into manicured stone. Savannah's tires crunched over the gravel, slow and deliberate, as if her car could sense that history was being rewritten with every rotation of its wheels. The estate loomed ahead, white pillars, black iron fixtures, windows glowing with warm light that had nothing to do with welcome. This house wasn't designed to comfort. It was built to intimidate. As she stepped out, the wind tugged at the hem of her black sheath dress, the one she'd chosen like armor. Structured, not severe. Elegant, not desperate. Around her neck, the silver Lady Justice pendant rested just below her collarbone. She had polished it that morning until the figure's blindfold gleamed. Inside, the air changed. There were polite greetings, air kisses, compliments laced with condescension, the sound of champagne glasses clinking against a background of curated jazz. People looked at her the way you might look at an old statue, unexpected, out of place, but still a little too powerful to ignore. Her eyes scanned the room. Portraits lined the hallway. Logan at prep school. Logan with their father on the golf course. Logan at the ribbon cutting for the Hale Institute's new surgical wing. No Savannah. No trace she had ever existed here. In the side parlor, distant cousins laughed too loudly, sloshing wine as they spoke. "She's just playing dress-up in that judge's robe," one of them muttered. Savannah paused. She didn't step in. Not yet. Let them talk. Let the walls record every word. She wasn't here to correct the narrative. She was here to replace it. A sudden hush fell over the house, followed by a burst of polite applause. The guests were being shepherded into the ballroom for the toast. Savannah followed the crowd, slipping into the back as Logan took center stage beneath a chandelier the size of a small car. He looked every inch the Hale prince, tall, golden, charismatic. "We're grateful," he said, raising his glass, "to family. Those who carry the Hale name with pride, and even those who drifted and have now returned." His eyes landed on Savannah with surgical precision. "Welcome back, sis." Laughter rippled. Not cruel. Worse, compliant. Savannah smiled, just enough. She raised her glass but didn't drink. Instead, she let her gaze move to the woman standing at Logan's side. Harper Rhodes. Beautiful, composed, but something in her eyes flickered. It wasn't recognition. It was dissonance, like a note played slightly out of tune. Later, after the toasts, Savannah found herself on the back veranda, the night air cool and sharp against her skin. She needed space. Away from the marble, the mirrors, the suffocating performance. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Logan leaned against the railing beside her, casual, loose, confident. The same posture he'd used their entire lives to disarm before he cut. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, swirling his drink. "But I have to admit the silent entrance? Very on brand." Savannah didn't look at him. "Didn't think you'd still be afraid of sharing a room with someone who tells the truth." He chuckled. Still dramatic. You haven't changed. No, she said, finally meeting his gaze. I did change. You just never noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly, but the smirk didn't fade. Let's not pretend you're here to play nice. What's your angle, Savannah? She stepped closer, her voice low, measured. I'm not here for revenge, Logan. I'm here for clarity, and maybe to see if the house would catch fire the moment I walked through the front door. He snorted, but his fingers tightened around his glass. Then came the twist. I found something, Savannah said. Something Dad buried years ago. His body stilled. She watched the blood drain just slightly from his face. Savannah had debated whether to mention it, whether to wait. But standing beside him now, seeing the old fear flicker behind the bravado, she knew she had to say it. I have the documents, the ones Elias left with the foundation, the trust, the sealed letter with my name on it. For the first time in years, Logan's mask cracked. You're bluffing. I'm not, she said. And if Harper knew that her future husband's inheritance came with a clause tied to a sister he tried to erase, what do you think she'd do? Silence. Savannah didn't need to press, not yet. She simply stepped away from the railing and left him standing there, drink half raised, mouth slightly open. Inside, Harper stood alone near the piano, fiddling with a ring on her finger. Savannah crossed the floor, slow and certain, until they were face to face. I admired your work, Harper said quietly, without preamble. That ruling on eviction caps in East Austin? You changed lives. Savannah nodded. You reminded me why I passed the bar. A pause. Then Harper asked, why didn't you ever speak about what happened with your family? Savannah tilted her head. Because I was still figuring out if I was the one who needed forgiving, or the one who needed to stop asking. Have you ever felt like silence protected you, but also erased you? What would you do if you discovered the people who betrayed you had something much deeper to hide? And as Savannah takes her next step into the past, she'll uncover a legacy far darker than a lost inheritance, and a truth that could destroy the Hale name forever. Don't miss what happens in part 3. The morning of the wedding broke with a softness Savannah didn't expect. No storm, no grand confrontation, just sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains and the faint hum of birds outside her hotel window, as if the world had already decided to keep turning no matter what happened in the Hale estate that day. She sat at the edge of her bed, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, her grandfather's letter lying open on the nightstand beside her. She'd read it again just after dawn, tracing each line as if it were scripture. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to outgrow. That morning, those words no longer felt like a wound. They felt like a door. Savannah hadn't spoken to Logan since the night on the veranda. She hadn't needed to. She'd seen it in his eyes, the terror of losing control, the moment his careful empire trembled. The sealed letter from Elias Hale was real, and what it contained had the power to dismantle everything. But she hadn't opened it. Not yet. She could have. She could have walked into the church, passed it to the press, or even Harper herself and watched the walls come down. But something deeper, something more fragile, held her back. Not mercy, not fear, something closer to truth. Because when you've been buried, there are two kinds of survival: rising above the wreckage or standing in it, naming every piece and still choosing not to be ruled by the ruin. At the chapel, guests were already gathering. Floral arrangements lined the aisle in delicate whites and blush tones. A harpist played near the altar, plucking out something hauntingly beautiful. Savannah walked in alone. No entourage, no drama, just her black dress, her steel eyes, and the pendant at her throat. Lady Justice always watching. Eyes turned, whispers followed. She ignored them all. Harper was already at the front in her gown, elegant, understated, eyes wide but calm. When she saw Savannah, something flickered between them. Not fear, not doubt, recognition. The ceremony began. The usual readings, the standard vows. Savannah stood at the back, silent. Then, just before the final exchange of rings, Harper paused. Her hand trembled as she reached for Logan's. She didn't look at the officiant. She looked at Savannah and spoke. Before I say these vows, she said, her voice soft but clear, I need to say something else. The room stilled. I spent most of my life believing that truth was something clean, that it came in documents, in facts, in law. But I've learned that sometimes the truth is who shows up and who disappears when you need them most. She turned fully now, facing the crowd, her eyes landing on Logan last. I can't marry into a silence that hurts people. I won't become part of a legacy built on erasure. Gasps echoed. Logan's smile twitched, faltered, vanished. Harper reached for the ring. Slowly, deliberately, she slid it from her finger and placed it on the altar. I'm sorry, she said, but this story doesn't end with me pretending it's still worth saving. Then she stepped down from the platform, walked straight to Savannah, and took her hand. Not with pity, not as an apology, but as someone choosing truth. Together, they walked out. Outside, the air was warm and trembling. A breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine and the sharp edge of finality. They stopped at the edge of the parking lot, silence blooming around them. I don't know what's next, Harper said. Savannah smiled faintly. That's how you know it's yours. They said their quiet goodbyes. No promises, no dramatics. Just two women who had each broken something open to make space for something real. Later that evening, Savannah stood in front of the Hale estate one last time. No one was outside. The lights inside still glowed like nothing had happened. But she knew. The foundation had cracked, and it wouldn't stop there. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope from Elias. The final letter. The one with her name, her inheritance, her power. Then, without a word, she dropped it into the brass mailbox at the front gate. It wasn't hers anymore. Let them read it. Let them see what they'd been afraid of all along. She was never going to burn the house down. She simply refused to live in it. That night, she returned to her apartment in Austin. No champagne, no speeches, just a quiet space that belonged to her and no one else. Savannah poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city breathe. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Maya. Proud of you. Savannah smiled, and somewhere deep inside her, the ache finally softened, not into forgetfulness, but into peace. Not everything had been restored, but everything had changed. Because this time, she hadn't just rewritten the ending, she had reclaimed the pen. What stayed with you most from Savannah's journey, and how would you define justice in your own life? Comment 100 if this story moved you. Tell us what country you're watching from. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that silence is not surrender. Thank you for watching Life Stories.